the bank assistant doesn't improvise all the time. There are some recurrent patterns in his or her behavior which can be accounted for by that kind of linear thinking, if you like. But if we only focus on this, then we will miss exactly what you described, the non-linearity, the unexpectedness, the surprise, the situated accommodation. But we shouldn't dismiss the linearity either, it seems to me.
Thank you very much, Professor, for your presentation. I like very much this schemata that you've presented, but of course I have some problems with it, so I want to ask you about it. At some point, I mean, we could read things like, for instance, if you look at the practices, dimension, you would look at intrinsic goods, and you say that at that level, knowledge would be tacit. But I think that you would agree in the fact that we have also to have a reflexive thought about what's the intrinsic goods and what are the standards of excellence. So at some point, this also has to be part of the representation. We can make similar remarks about some parts of the schema that should be also taken into account in some other schema, part of the schema. You know, there's connections there that are not showing because, you know, you can say that practices are there in the organizational life, of course, and that at some point, you know, there's a tacit knowledge. But I would, you know, ask you a question about that, the connection between tacit knowledge and this reflexive consciousness that you have to have about standards and about goods and about whatnot.
Yes,
you know?
yes. That kind of, remember that I'm constrained by my own construction here. I constructed a table. There's that much you can do in a table. This is my own, if you like, ensemblization of magmatic being. I had to organize my own presentation. Therefore, I had to ensemblize. I had to create some distinctions, categories, in order to make it more enduring and also understandable to others. A lot of the complexity that you're hinting is missing from this particular table. That's why this is not in itself enough. Hopefully my narrative was a good complement to this particular table. But you're right. Yes, reflexivity is always there. Standards of excellence are not immutable, far from it. In any human practice, in any collectivity, it's exactly what we debate very often. Should we be doing this? Should we be doing that? How should we be marking students? How should we be repairing our machines? How should we relate to one another? You see this in art all the time. Gobridge, I think, can be read also in those terms. When he describes the changes in painting styles, for example, it is about exactly the kind of reflexivity that comes when artists reflect on creations of previous artists and then they advance or put, they push forward, they move forward the standards of their own practice. Reflexivity is there. Change is there. Hopefully in my narrative, this kind of dynamic element was evident. This is a static picture you have, but indeed for analytical purposes. But in real life, the three things intermesh, they're feedback loops, and there's change.
Hi, thanks for your presentation. I'm a little bit skeptical about layers, and I guess I need to be convinced a little bit more, and especially when these layers are supposed to be ontological. And this, I'm especially puzzled by what you call the level of representations. I guess I understand what you mean, but I'm not quite sure what the status of these layers would be, ontologically speaking. And so I'd like to hear you a little bit more about that. And I'd be curious to hear you also about what would be, for analytical purposes.
For what?
For analytical purposes. I mean, where you're analyzing practices, what's the gain to make such a postulate, to make such an assumption about layers of representation, really?
Yeah, let me see whether I understand the question correctly. You're saying that what drives you to this conceptualization? Why do you postulate this as as three ontological components? Is this what you're asking me?
From an analytical perspective.
Yeah.
Why do you need to make this postulate?
Okay, good. I need to. Well, I think I detect two things in your question. One is the ontological thing. Why do these things need to be given the status of ontological categories? Because these are features of the world, the way I see them, are features of the world. That's why my initial question was, given our experience of the world, Given that we see patterns in the world, we see some stability in the world, and we see change in the world, given our experience of this, then what must organization be like? Just to give you some background on this, that's why I entitled my talk as Organization as Chaosmos. This chaosmos is a term used by some French philosophers. It has been used by Edgar Morin, for example, by Félix Guattari, Castoriadis also, and they want to capture something which I think it is valuable. That is, we see patterns in the world, we see stability in the world, but also the world fundamentally is also chaos, in the sense that chaos, not as in chaos theory, chaos as in the abyss, from which new things emerge and new things come about. So I've got to somehow find a way of, I want to find a way of understanding this stability and change, this pattern and surprise. And that drives me to the next step, which is to postulate these three ontological categories. Hopefully my argument is persuasive enough, but if you push me further, there is no ultimately on ontological issues. I cannot offer a more elaborate account. This is what I think organization must be like for our experience to accommodate both stability and change, pattern and change at the same time. Now, this, if this is accepted, I think it can be used for more detailed research projects. For example, the paper we presented yesterday with my colleague Dionysus, it was on the first column. We tried to understand why, in a particular startup firm in Athens, why formal organization was not there. You may think it's contradictory. How can you have a firm which is not organized? Well, it is possible. If by organized you mean as terms of representations, abstractions. There was very low abstraction, very low representation, very few routines, very few rules. So in that sense, it was a system which had low in formal organization, or low in representation and abstraction. At the same time, there were patterns there. People did try to make a living. People did try to accommodate one another, as well as the customers. So there were some emergent patterns there. And we can zoom in a different project in that interaction order to see how those patterns emerge. How do people instantiate those rules and those cultural norms in idiosyncratic, open-ended contexts? That will be another part of it. And also, a lot of research, as you know, has been conducted in practices. Also, I think it resonates with Jim and Elizabeth's ideas to some extent when they talk about the textualization of experience. In my language, textualization is about representation. That is, Jim and Elizabeth, they postulate conversations and textualization. Conversations would be the third column over there. The kind of people do when they engage in action, and the conversations they engage. So organization will be evident in that interaction order, but at the same time, for this to have enduring features, then people need to take account of their experiences, hence they textualize their experiences. I find resonances now, but they need to be worked out.
Thank you.